Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Depending on where you are in this world, God bless you. This is Gloria White coming to you from Utah, USA. Today we're going to continue in Halley's Bible Handbook in the book of Revelation, and we are in chapter 8, verses 1 through 6, the seventh seal. Out of the seventh seal came the seven trumpets. The double seven is thought to emphasize the idea of totality. Thus is the two sevens, chapters 6 to 11, are outlined, the struggle and the complete, final, everlasting victory of Christ over the kingdoms of the world. And that's chapter 11, verse 15. The prayers of the saints in chapter 8, verse 3 and 4. God about to answer the cries of the martyrs of verse 6 of chapter 6, verses 9 and 10. Answer the awful judgments of the seven trumpets. It seems to indicate that prayer has some influence with God in shaping the course of history, and I certainly do believe that. The half-hour's silence and thunders, lightnings, earthquakes, and that's in chapter 8, verse 1 and 5, may imply momentous events in the making. Chapter 8, verses 7 through 13. The first four trumpets. The sounding of these four trumpets seemed to announce the releasing of the four winds of the Lamb's wrath in chapter 6, verse 16 through 7, and also 3. Held back while the elect were being sealed. First trumpet. Hail, fire, blood, cast upon the earth. Second trumpet. Great burning mountain cast into the sea. Third trumpet. Great burning star fell upon the rivers. Fourth trumpet. Sun, moon, stars darkened. The third part of the earth, sea, rivers, and heavenly bodies, was smitten, as if destruction was only partial. Remember, there was a third of the angels that Satan drew away from God in the overthrow or the catapult. And the next verse is, these four trumpets may refer to God's judgments on Roman Empire or on world at the end of time, or both. Fall of the Roman Empire. If they refer to the Roman Empire, then here again, as in previous visions, the imagery seems to be a very good symbolic predictive portrayal of actual history. The parallel with the facts of the breakup of the Roman Empire fits so exactly, it seems it must have been envisioned in these four trumpets. In the 1st and 2nd centuries A.D., Rome reached her zenith. In 3rd century A.D., empire began to crack with civil war. In all 3 centuries, Rome persecuted the church. In 4th century A.D., in a colossal government upheaval, Christianity was accepted and made state religion of empire. In the same 4th century, the mighty empire was divided and became Eastern Roman Empire and Western Roman Empire, the two legs of iron. See map page 713, which we've already seen. For 800 years, no foreign enemy had set foot on Italian soil. But in the 5th century A.D., barbarians from the north began to pour in. Hail, fire, and blood. A first trumpet burned the earth. That's in chapter 8, verse 7. The Goths in A.D. 409 descended upon Italy in savage fury, and left behind burning cities and scorched, bloody, and desolated lands. The great burning mountain of the second trumpet came into sea in chapter 8, verses 8 and 9. The Vandals in AD 422 swept across Gaul and Spain into Africa. They built a navy and for 30 years fought the Roman navy, which for 600 years had controlled the Mediterranean and drove it from the sea. Great burning star, the third trumpet, fell upon the rivers in chapter 8, verse 10 and 11. Attila the Hun from the depth of Central Asia appeared in 440 AD on the banks of the Danube. At the head of 800,000 fighting men, pushing westward, he met the Roman armies and defeated them with awful slaughter, successfully on the river Marne, the river Rhone, and the river Po, so that these rivers actually ran with blood. Land so spoiled, he returned to the Danube. When he died, the river was turned aside, and his body buried beneath its bed. The waters still flow over his grave. He was indeed a scourge of the rivers. Sun, moon, and stars darkened at the fourth trumpet in chapter 8, verse 12. Another horde of barbarians from the Rhine country, headed by Odysseus in 476 AD, besieged and took the city of Rome. 4 successive blows: Gothic invasion of Italy in 409 AD, Vandals' destruction of Roman navy in 422 to 452 AD, Attila's awful slaughters on the river systems on Central Europe, Odysseus' seizure of Rome. Under these appalling disasters, the mighty Roman Empire, which for more than half a millennium had ruled the world, went down. The light of Roman civilization went out, and the dark ages of the world began. Part 3, chapter 8, in verses 7, 8, 10, and 12. The Roman Empire fell in 3 sections. The western part, Rome is its capital, by all odds the most powerful part of the original empire, fell in 476 AD. The Asiatic and African parts of the empire were overrun by Mohammedans in the 7th century AD. The Eastern European Empire, split off from Rome in 395 AD, with Constantinople as its capital, fell to the Mohammedans, the Islam, the Muslims, in 1453 AD. And that's what began, or what was brought about the Christian Crusades. And the Christian Crusaders were not a bloody band of murderers. They came out in oppositions against the Muslims who, and under Islam, was taking over the entire Middle East and Africa, and had gone as far as Spain with murdering and killing, and they piled up the heads of the people so high that you couldn't see over the top of them from the horseback. Now, so people think, oh, the Christians were the murderers and awful people. No, if the Christians had not formed the Crusades, if the noble princes had not put their money to work against the invasion of Islam, then Christianity as we know it would have been extinguished then and there. That was their goal. So, I have a video concerning that that whole event in history. If anyone is interested in seeing it, just let me know. Email me and I'll email it to you. The link. Chapter 9, verses 1 through 11. The fifth trumpet. The army of demon locusts. This host of horrible monsters with complex appearance of locusts, horses, scorpions, lions, and humans came out of the abyss. And that's chapter 9, verse 1, 2, and 11. And that's the bottomless pit, led by Abaddon, or Apollyon, who was the devil, or is the devil, or one of his angels. This indicates the hellish origin of the woes to follow. Satan has already been mentioned as persecuting and corrupting the churches in Smyrna, Pergamum, and Thyatira in chapter 2, verse 9, 10, 13, 14, and 24, and is named as instigator of Rome's imperial persecutions of the church in chapter 12, verses 13 through 16. Of what he is now about to do with the locust plague, we are warned. Woe, 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 hinting its frightfulness. These demon locusts are thought by many commentators to be a predictive picture of the rise and spread of Mohammedanism, or the Muslims, or Islam, or the tribulation period of the last days, or both. Mohammedanism. In the 7th century, Mohammedanism swept the Eastern world like a tidal wave and blotted out Christianity in Southwest Asia and North Africa, the Euphrates and Nile rivers, the eastern and southern borders of the Mediterranean, lands of the Bible story, lands in which the Bible originated and grew, lands in which God's revelation of himself to mankind was nurtured and brought to completion, lands in which God formed and trained the nation Israel for 2,000 years to pave the way for the coming of Christ, lands hallowed forever as the scene of Christ's life and death and resurrection and his redemptive work for mankind, lands which were the cradle of Christianity, and were for 600 years Christian, the original Christian world. In these lands, by one fell blow of the Mohammedan sword, Christianity was blotted out and Mohammedanism was established, and they have been Mohammedan ever since. 600 years Christian, now for 1,300 years Mohammedan. More Mohammedan now in the world than Protestant Christians. More Muslims in the world than there are Protestant Christians. Muhammad, we have to realize that Muhammad and the Islam nations were about to totally extinguish the light of Christianity when the Christian crusaders, the princes, and came, and the nobles armed themselves and created an army and was able to push them back. That explains why the Vatican has a 50-foot wall, which is 40 feet thick, was to keep the Muslims out of the Vatican. It's a lot of history there. Let's see. Muhammad, it's 570 to 632 AD in Mecca, Arabia, declared himself to be the prophet of God and set out at the head of an army to propagate the religion by the sword. Soon the whole of Arabia was conquered. Mohammedan armies, under successful leaders, swept on in their conquest. Syria fell in 634 AD, Jerusalem in 637 AD, Egypt in 638 AD, Persia in 640 AD, North Africa in 689. Asia and African Christianity thus swept away. Mohammedans moved into Europe. Spain fell in 711 AD. Then they headed on into France, where at Tours the Mohammedan army was met and defeated AD in 732 by Charles Martel, grandfather of Charlemagne. That was one of the decisive battles of the ages. Except for that victory, Christianity might have been entirely exterminated from the earth. Here are some of the things that make it look like this fifth trumpet might refer to Mohammedanism. Locust, Arabia. Preeminently was a land of locusts. It was in Africa that Mohammedanism originated. Shapes of locusts like war horses, with scorpion-like tails, crowns like gold, faces like men's faces, hair like women's hair, teeth like lions' teeth, breastplates of iron, and wings that sounded like chariots and horses rushing to war. That's in chapter 9, verses 7 through 10. This is indeed a very good description of Mohammedan armies, composed of fierce, relentless horsemen, famous for their beards, with long hair like women's hair, with yellow turbans on their heads that looked like gold, and they had iron coats of armor. Smoke from the abyss. Chapter 9, verses 2-3. It was out of this smoke that the flood of water in Revelation chapter 12, verse 15, which the dragon cast after the woman, may refer to the persecution of the church by Roman Empire. The earth helped the woman. The woman was Israel, not the church. In Revelation 12, verse 16, may allude to conversion of Emperor Constantine and Christianization of Roman Empire, which put an end to the persecutions. And we'll stop there. But we're going to go read Revelation 12, because I think that needs to be clarified. Sometimes some of the things that I read there, I just know that it's not correct. The interpretation is incorrect. So here we are in the book of Revelation, King James Version, chapter 12. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Now this is Rachel, and this is Israel, and the 12 tribes: Judah, Simeon, Nathaniel, Gad, Reuben, the 12 tribes. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered. It was the birth of the Israeli nation. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon, which is Satan, having 7 heads and 10 horns, representing what's coming with the New World Order, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered. Now Satan drew away a 3rd part of the angels from God in a revolt, in what's called the catapult. And so here the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered. This is Israel ready to be formed, the birth of Israel, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. To take, remember, Christ comes from the line of Judah, which is one of Israel's sons. Here, he's trying to take away the line in which Christ is going to come. Verse 5 is an unfulfilled prophecy. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness. Now, who is this child that's going to rule with the rod of iron? Well, this is Jesus Christ, of course. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there for 1,260 days. This is 3.5 years. Remember in Daniel when it says, I think it's in Daniel, it could be in another book, I'm not recalling clearly right now, but when he says, and when you see these, I think that's in Matthew, actually, when you see these things, flee from Judea into the mountains. Now, this is because when you see the desolation, the abomination of desolation, when you see him standing where he ought not, then flee to the mountains. If you're in those in Judea, flee to the mountains. Now God has prepared a place for Israel to be, and he's going to care for her for the 3.5 years that Satan's going to be bringing total havoc on the earth and upon Jerusalem. But God's going to fight for Jerusalem. Now let's see, here we are, verse 7. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. Satan and his angels thrown out, locked up on great chains. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. Verse 11, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. By the word of the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they loved not their lives unto death. Remember, Jesus said, if if you give your life, if you save your life, you lose your life. If you lose your life, you save your life. And what does it profit a man to save his mortal body and to lose his soul? Here, and they loved not their lives unto death. They didn't do anything to preserve their mortal life by falling down before Satan to get a bowl of food, or to get some kind of medical treatment, or to feed their children. They just refused until they died. They refused to serve Satan. And they overcame them by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. Verse 12. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. Remember, Jesus said that the time would be shortened lest no flesh survive or remain. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man child, and that would be Israel. And the woman were given two wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time, for 3.5 years, from the face of the serpent, which is the devil, which is Satan. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman. Now, the place where Israel is going to go into the mountains, Judea, when it leaves, there is a place where the opening is just very small, and there's a river that runs there that keeps anybody from going in there. And then it opens up into a much bigger space. And God, just like he parted the Red Sea and stopped the river Jordan for the priests to cross over, and the people of coming out of Egypt to cross over into the promised land, God's going to do the same thing, where Elijah slapped his mantle on the water and it parted for them to walk through. And after Elijah had done that, Elisha also did that. Very same thing. So they're going to part the water there for them to cross over the dry land into this place of safety. And they're going to be there for 3.5 years. But he's going to flee after her. And that's why he cast the flood from his mouth. But the earth opened her mouth and swallowed it. So let's see. So, and to the woman were given two wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time and times and a half time, from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away with the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. The Jews do not have the testimony of Jesus Christ. These people here, then right here in Revelation 12, verse 17, and the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. These would be us, Christians. When he couldn't get to the Israelites, he's coming after the Christians. And then we see the chapter 13, and we won't go into that, but that's the formation of the New World Order. And this video is long enough. You know, guys, I get carried away. But if you have any questions, you can put them down in the description box, or you can email me at sweetsavorywords@gmail.com. And as always, I love you.